Welcome you all to Living in Scripture, our weekly gathering to live Scripture and to be lived by it, to realize how the sacred texts across traditions, though in this case we are addressing Gaudiya Vaishnava text, we are trying to address them in a way that sheds universal wisdom for all of us and to show the universality of revelation in so many ways. So how Scripture is living and how we can live in that living, breathing wisdom. Today, we are focusing on one very interesting verse from the Bṛhad Bhāgavatāmṛta of Sri Sanatana Goswami, the great nectar of the Bhagavatam. It's a very unique book, very beautiful, which somehow narrates very archetypal journey of spiritual progress, passing through many layers of religious conception till attaining one's ultimate desired goal, while in the context of doing that, witnessing different expressions of spirituality that the main characters in this book go through. But they appreciate all this diversity. They incorporate that somehow or other, though their heart's call takes them somewhere else. And they continue their journey, well, benefiting from all this other diversity. And so many other interesting points, which in this case, we'll focus today on the importance of the name of God. A very central aspect of the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, but a very central aspect of almost every other wisdom tradition. The invoking of the name of God, the power of the name. Sometimes it's called onomatodoxy, the doctrine that God and his name are non-different. So by singing, by chanting, by invoking these divine sounds, God is present there. That's a very important point. Not even by singing this name, we are calling God who is somewhere else, but since he's non-different from his names, the very uttering of those syllables make him present to us. In one sense, he's always present, he's omnipresent, but he's specially present, we will argue, in a very vishishta, very special way, he's present in the name. In a more generic way, he's present everywhere in every atom here and there. But when the names are invoked with, of course, proper heart, which makes for the proper names, God becomes properly, especially manifested there. So I'll share the verse in Sanskrit and in English, and we'll try to explore what it has to tell us today. śrīman-nāma prabhos tasya śrī-mūrter atipriyam jagad-dhitaṃ sukhopāsyaṃ sa-rasaṃ tat-samaṃ nahi. This is Bṛhad Bhāgavatāmṛta, second canto, second volume, third chapter, verse 184. And the translation says, Prabhu's splendid name, dearer to him than even his beautiful form, is beneficial for the world, easily worshipped, and full of rasa. Indeed, it has no equal. So this is a very beautiful, touching meditation, very much akin to a famous verse from our tradition, Nam Chintamani Krishna's Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha Purna Suddha Nityam Mukto Abhinatam Namanamina, which states, again, the name, basically it's a parallel version. No? The name and the name are non-different. This name is a touchstone. It's not different from God. It's complete, pure, eternally liberated, full of rasa, conscious, and so on and so forth. So in this particular verse, Sri Sanatana Goswami is referring to Prabhu. Prabhu is a name for the Lord to begin with. Sometime in our communities, we call each other Prabhu, which is a high praise. And it's funny because sometimes people refer to me generally as Swami, and sometimes they call me Prabhu, and they apologize, interestingly. Oh, sorry, I call you Prabhu, I didn't call you Swami. Like if Prabhu will be something lower than Swami or like Maharaj. Swami, Maharaj has to do with my position as a sannyasi, but Prabhu means Lord. So in one sense, they are okay that they are apologizing because, yeah, Prabhu is too much for me to be called as such. But just a reminder that of the weight of this name, the importance of the name. He who has all this power, Prabhu, especially powerful Lord. So śrīman-nāma Prabhu. So he's talking about the name of Sriman Prabhu, of this great personality, this great Lord, this loving God, as we talked last week, you may recall, about his sweetness and his love and his compassion and his gratefulness and his humility and so on. So what happens with this name? The verse is not talking so much first in connection to us and the name, but how God himself relates to his own name. That's a very interesting perspective. What God feels for his name. Many times we hear what we should feel, or ideally what we are supposed to feel in connection to the name, how we are to understand, how we are to conceive it. But what about God and his own name? How does he relate to none? Of course, they are one and different at the same time. They're non-different, but at the same time, there is some difference, as we say. Srila Rupa Goswami makes that case even. Very interesting. He says, if we are to, in his Namastakam, different prayers praising the name, if we want to make the case that between the name of God and God there is no difference, fair enough. I subscribe to that. But he's praising the name here. Also, if you will still want to make a difference, we can make a difference. He said, between the name of God and God, the name of God is more merciful. The name of God is not different from God, but is God extending himself in the form of sound in the most generous way to every single corner, every single heart. So there's a place to make some special mention to the name of God, even above, quote unquote, God, though they are not different. We have to keep a bit non-different, different dynamics in mind. So going back to how the divine relates to his own name, this verse says, Srinam prabhos tasya śrī-mūrter api atipriyam. Right? So atipriyam means very dear, most dear than śrī-mūrter, that his own form. So the Sweet Absolute considers his own name as dearer than his own form. That's probably why we begin in our tradition the sequence Nama, Rupa, Guna, Lila. First the name, then the form, then the qualities, then the Lila. That's one way to explain that. First comes the divine sound, more generous, most sweet, and that will reveal the rest of the sequence. God's form, God qualities, God divine play, Lila. So the name of God is dearer to him than his own form. Why? There are different ways to explain this. There's a very sweet story shared in our tradition in this connection. And it says as follows. Once the Sweet Absolute, Sri Krishna, was engaged in Lila, in romantic celebration with a female counterpart, with its female counterhole, with the goddess Sri Radha in Lila. So God, the Absolute, Krishna, was falling at the feet of Radha, at the feet of love personified. He's falling at those feet. Dehi pada palavam mudaram, like Gita Govinda said. Krishna saying, I will fall at your feet and serve your feet. And when Krishna is serving the feet of Sri Radha, massaging them and so on, at one point he starts to ponder, wow, these feet are the very goal of my life. I would like to remain forever in this moment, in eternity, serving this feet. God himself as a servant, Krishna Kinkara. He entering full in the identity of a servant of love. That's who God ultimately is. So he's serving the feet of love personified as the goddess Sri Radha and feeling, oh gosh. God himself is saying, oh gosh. I would like to stay here forever. How can these feet are the zenith of all realization? How can I make myself available to serve those feet forever? So God is Kalanidhi also means a notion of arts, a very smart, crafty person. So what he does is he takes some painting that he has nearby, some lac that he will decorate the feet of Radha with different designs and ornaments. And he starts to write his own name on the feet of Radha. Krishna, Shri Krishna, which is not different from him, remember. The name and the named are not different. So that's a way in which he attempts to become eternally present at the feet of love personified. And Krishna, while writing that syllables, he starts to shed profuse tears, and Sri Radha is looking at him crying while writing something in her feet that she cannot see. She's wondering why he's crying so profusely. And Krishna is so touched by seeing the good fortune of his name. And he's concluded, my name is more fortunate than I am. Because in the form of my name, I can remain perpetually at the feet of the goddess Sri Radha. While in my physical form, my murti, as this verse says, sometimes I'm with her, sometimes I'm not with her. So in this sense, my name is more fortunate than me. In this sense, my name is dearer to me than my own form. Tasya śrī-mūrter api atipriyam, like this verse is mentioning. So behind every philosophical concept, there is generally some lila that shows how that concept is played out. And then the second half of the verse says, jagad-dhitaṃ sukhopāsyaṃ, sa-rasaṃ. So these three qualities. First, jagad-dhitaṃ. This name, these syllables. To begin with, these syllables, these names are beneficial for God himself. Now it's the turn of the world. Now it's the turn of us. But to begin to make the case, this verse says, the name is so incredible that it's incredible even for Krishna himself, for the named, for God, for the divine. So if it's incredible for him, what to speak of us? So how it's incredible for us? First of all, jagad-dhitaṃ is beneficial for the whole world. It's a blessing for those in this world who embrace the divine name, who try to develop a relationship with the divine through the chanting, through the invocation of these sacred syllables. And I think we all here can bear testimony to that, especially in our tradition, but again, in many other traditions where the chanting of the name of God occupies a very central position. Sukhopāsyaṃ. Sukhopāsyaṃ means is easily worshipped. Sukhopāsyaṃ. Upāsyaṃ comes from upasana. Upasana means worship, and Suka means with joy. Like Krishna will say in the Gita, sukham kartam. We are supposed to engage in bhakti with certain ease. Like last week we spoke about lila. And lila was a movement out of ease and out of the fulfillment of joy, out of the sense of celebration. So here we have something similar. Sukhopāsyaṃ. The names of God are to be worshipped with ease, with joy, not with difficulty. They come in a very generous way. Śrīman-Mahaprabhu will say, right? Nam namakari bahudaniya sarva saktista tarpita niyamita shmarane nagalaha. There are many names, endless names, all of them invested with all these powers, and there are no fast and strict rules to invoke them. What else can we ask? Right? What else can we ask? We are asked to do something. Everything else is given to us. All these varieties of names, full of power, not coming with very rigid rules to invoke them. And as Srila Siddhar Maharaj will say, what we are asked for is to extend our hand and take the gift, accept the gift. That's our part. The rest is being done by the Sweet Absolute. All the gifts is being prepared and wrapped and enveloped and decorated and brought into a golden plate. And sadhana practice for us is on a daily basis, choose the gift over and over again. Go one more time there, pick the gift, be grateful for the gift. And of course, not only taking the gift, take it to serve it, to honor it. Because it's sa-rasaṃ then. It's full of rasa. These divine syllables are not only many in quantity, in variety, but they are full of juice. Rasa means juice, means sap, means sacred aesthetic rapture, as sometimes it is described. They are full of ecstasy, full of divine flavor. If we relate to them properly, again, with openness, with vulnerability, with gratitude, with appreciation. All these verses here and so many other verses are there for us to gain some appreciation of the wealth and the gift coming in these divine sounds. And that's why Mahaprabhu in the second verse of Shikshastakam spends 3 lines of the 4th to say how grateful he is and how many qualities and gifts come in the name. And then he says, but Kintu, I'm so unfortunate. I have no attraction for that. But first he puts in place all that is there to appreciate. And the verse concludes saying, tat-samaṃ nahi. Nahi means there is not, certainly there is not tat-samaṃ, something equal to that. No, it can only be compared with itself. You cannot compare the name of God with something else, not even with God, Rupa Goswami will say, as we mentioned. The name of God can only be compared with the name of God, because there is nothing to be compared with. There has no equal. It's supreme, supremely generous, supreme filled with rasa, supreme filled with mercy and grace, with the benefit for the world, easily worshipped. What else can we ask? And on top of that, is dearer to God more than his own form. So what special place in God's heart and life must this name occupy? And what place that name is destined to occupy in our own heart and life? That's a question that we can stay now with. Concluding our sharing today, I invite you also in the comment section to share with me, with us, your realizations, your experience, not only hearing these words, but with the name, with the divine name, so we can continue to enrich each other in their journey. Thank you so much. See you next week in our next chapter of Living Scriptures.